Your character stands atop a grassy hill. The sun glints off your golden hair, rippling in the warm breeze. You absent-mindedly rub the gem-studded hilt of your magic sword, and glance over at the dwarf and elf, bickering as usual about how to load the horses. The magic user has memorized her spells and says she's ready to go. A dangerous dungeon entrance gapes at you from the mountain nearby, and inside a fearsome dragon awaits. Time to get moving. Frank Menser, 1983. Hi, I'm BECMI Berserker and welcome back to my channel. This text is from the first page of the famous red box basic rules. You know, the one with that picture of the warrior and the dragon. I had to go back and read it again after seeing the latest promotional release from what's now being called D&D Direct, which is clearly some attempt to distinguish one corporate arm of Wizards of the Coast D&D brand from another. This featured an extended segment on the new Dungeons & Dragons virtual tabletop offer, which, I have to be honest, left me feeling a bit cold. Don't get me wrong, the eye candy was amazing, but I have to agree with something the basic expert said over on his channel. 10 years ago I might have been all over this, but in those 10 years I've played with numerous VTTs, resulting in the same lingering feeling of dissatisfaction with each and every one of them. Now that's not limited to their technical capabilities. No, each one was at the top of its field at a specific moment in time. It's more than that. Obviously, I missed being in the same room as my players, but that wasn't the core offer of early VTTs. The offer was to join up players who had become separated, or allow players to make new connections. But their use has expanded to be part of some face-to-face games, as a kind of quality of life improvement to what's happening at the table. I mean, why deal with maps when you can just have a map in front of each of you? And it does dark vision too. This dissatisfaction was the same feeling I got as I watched the promotional release, only more profound, and, dare I say it, I was a little more than dismayed. But first, why did I feel the need to revisit the introductory text from the basic rules? Well, in short, I needed to remind myself why I play the game of Dungeons & Dragons, why I play any role-playing game. The answer is simple, of course. It's because Dungeons & Dragons and other role-playing games are games of the imagination. They are games that stimulate the imagination, and enable you to take an active role in progressing the story. So why was I so dismayed by what I saw in the promotional release? Well, it was because it profoundly demonstrated the disconnect between function and imagination. We saw 3 players who enthusiastically consumed the visual information presented to them, determined their next move, and then applied it. The comment from the gentleman saying how much he enjoyed the movement of the figures spoke volumes. It was reminiscent of the feedback one gets from just scrolling through your smartphone. You're doing nothing, but you're somehow satisfied by the non-productive movement on the screen. 1-0 to dopamine. The oohs and ahs of the players watching things explode was, in my opinion, the epitome of dumbing down of imagination. Why engage your brain when you're just fed wonderful images by a machine in colours you clearly cannot hope to, imagine? Imagination. We've used imagination since we humans existed, but we've also tried to render our imaginations ever since we could paint on a cave wall or carve a shape out of a rock. We've tried to articulate dreams via pictures, and we've made films out of books because we wanted to see our heroes in the flesh and not just in our minds. And we've created computerized environments for us to play in so that we can run around the towns and cities we've read about in those same books. So is an immersive VTT just a natural next step in this process? Is it actually just a version of what we've always done? Well, I actually think yes, it is. But we know from experience that the realization and projection of imagination into the real world is not always fulfilling. Just because we can do it doesn't mean it will make the experience any better. In other words, the reality never quite reaches the heights of fantasy. One word that keeps cropping up with VTTs is immersion. That is, the realism of what's on the screen will, presumably, immerse you further into the game than you thought possible. In my opinion, this word immersion is that same meaningless word as when you're sold a product that's faster, better, more satisfying. You're forever sold more immersion, but you're still sitting in the same chair you always do, sipping on whatever takes your fancy. You can't measure immersion, but you can be sold it over and over again. Immersion used to be 8-bit graphics. Then it was 3D rendered POV. Then it was open world landscapes where you can go anywhere you wanted. And now it's a VTT with all the bells and whistles that manages your character profile and aligns everything with the latest rules, with minimum engagement of your brain. But I'm calling time on immersion, for the simple fact that there is a barrier between you and the experience, a barrier that limits your imagination by drawing all the pictures and environment for you, a barrier that inhibits your participation by saying, you don't need to do anything, just sit back and watch. That barrier is the VTT. The VTT takes away the requirement to imagine. To break it down, it inhibits your ability to conceive a square because you are just shown a shape and told it's a square. The most immersive tool humans possess is their imagination. It's why any work of art pales in comparison to an artist's conception, by their own admission, when they do admit it. Watching critical reviews of recent movies, and there's a consistent common theme around a concept called show don't tell. That is, in a video production, the best way to engage your audience is through the build-up of anticipation through the showing of a series of actions that leads the viewer's imagination to begin to draw conclusions about where the story is going. It can actually be a great misdirection tool as well when a plot twist is desired. The show don't tell concept works brilliantly in film and video, as that is how to stimulate the imagination in that environment. However, modern productions have recently begun to tell rather than show, which combined with the video information on the screen leaves nothing to the imagination. The audience's involvement has been dumbed down. The opportunity to use one's imagination has been taken away. In my opinion, the same is happening in the D&D and RPG space, but in the opposite direction. Role-playing games emerged from a position of tell, don't show. That's basically what theatre of the mind is. It's a shared experience where you are all individually encouraged to conceive a situation and work together to deal with it. This happens through the clarification of understanding between players and the DM about details of the environment, so that those details may be manipulated. A DM has to be careful about what he or she says, because some clever players can imagine utilising the most mundane of narrated features to their advantage. And this is another strength of Tell Don't Show. It develops abstract thinking, and gets players conceiving incredibly absurd solutions to problems that, some of the time, even work. In my experience of playing VTTs for over 10 years, and my Roll20 account tells me it's been live since 2012, which I struggle to believe, this abstract thinking has declined in player groups because of the visual information presented on the screen. My own abstract thinking has been affected as VTT games descend into where tokens can go or not. The questions from players become, can I see this? What's over here? Is that a chest in the corner? Rather than, what can I see? Or what does my character see? It's become show rather than tell. My relationship with VTTs has been a contentious one, initially forced due to players moving away and the VTTs just becoming part of the D&D decor. But apart from the issues I have with VTTs that I've already mentioned, they're incredibly labour intensive, and for little appreciation from the players. You could spend hours on a map anticipating your players' incredulous reaction to your artwork for them to barely notice, even though they're staring directly at your work. In my opinion, it's not an efficient use of time considering the muted reception, and you never want to get stuck in that loop of always trying to impress your players with better visuals. The brain gets numb to better pretty quick. Hell, people barely notice the quality of 4K these days. D&D's direction is becoming more show than tell. Wizards of the Coast's entire strategy is to make the game played more online than not. It can be monetized easier that way, so wouldn't that be a public company's preferred direction for generating cash? Therefore, D&D is in danger of becoming more and more of a visual experience, and less of an imaginative one. In my opinion, this is tragic for what has been the core offer of the hobby, to stimulate the imagination for the purposes of collaborative play. As I understand things, the new VTT is even going to be available on consoles, broadening its reach, and combining this with the intriguing Minecraft offer is, in my opinion, actually genius. Fed up with running through Neverwinter with your Minecraft buddies? Hey, let's quickly hop over onto the VTT for a quick game on that platform. Bored of that now? Let's jump back into Minecraft. This is how kids use their consoles. I've seen it firsthand. With a bunch of always online friends and a VTT that's readily available, why would 11 or 12-year-olds ever think of picking up a book and leaving the house to travel a couple of miles to play? Wizards is getting them while they're young, and influencing them in how to obtain the best D&D experience, whatever best means. An experience that you spend alone in your basement rather than with your friends. So ironic considering their own messaging during the 3rd edition years. With the VTT, Wizards will be, for a time, serving two masters. The legacy gamers of around my own generation, who in my opinion are actually a bit of a barrier to WotC's business model, and the new generation, coming through in bigger numbers than ever before, wanting to play D&D in a much more transactional way. So this is a call to action. It's time to double down on imaginative play. It's time to ramp up the face-to-face playing whenever possible, with no connected media at the table. And if you must resort to VTT due to circumstances, do it theatre of the mind. It's time to re-engage the brain and light the fires of imagination that have been cold for so long. Like an ancient dwarven redoubt that is full of treasure, it's time to ignite those abandoned forges and stoke the flames as they rise to your bidding. Tell, don't show, and your mastery of the dungeon will flow like molten gold through the minds of your players, bringing you all the true riches of the role-playing game experience, as Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson intended. I'm BECMI Berserker. Keep making your saving throws, and I hope to see you back here soon.